Let me begin with some caveats. Academics always begin with caveats, so I'll give you 3 of them up front. With respect to the ideas I'm talking about today, I am more a convert to than a creator of those ideas. I came here with the beginning of the faculty, but we didn't come until 2 years of discussion among the administration had gone on before, and many of the ideas on this sheet were formulated by other people. Secondly, when I talk about what we decided to do, what Stockton decided to do, that overstates the amount of unanimity that was going on here. If you put academics in a room and tell them that they have a blank slate on which they can write, you're going to get a great deal of disagreement, and we certainly had that. It was mostly a short-handled hatchet fight in the early days over the soul and direction of this brand new college. And the ideas that are on this sheet are the ideas that prevailed in that hatchet fight. And finally, you'd be able to figure it out on your own, but I pretty much approve of what came out of the hatchet fight. I like Stockton. I think it took a number of very difficult decisions, a number of very precarious decisions, but decisions that have worked out pretty well. So what I will try to do for the people in this room who are new faculty members and not the old dogs who know all of this stuff already, is to talk to you about what we thought we were doing when we put the place together and the impact that that had on the structure of the place and hence on the people who come here. Let's start. Now we're going to start to go down the sheet as I promised that we would. Stockton, by design, took down upon itself a very difficult mission. And the mission was to provide the kind of quality education that you would normally find at the most exclusive and most expensive private liberal arts colleges in the country, and make that available to and workable for state college students, with the full understanding that many of those students might not be thoroughly prepared for that kind of education, and that because of their career orientation, they might not even be very interested in it. So it was a precarious decision to take. But we thought if we could make it work, we could build a better college and get them a better education than if we didn't take that risk. So that was the mission that the college was set up to pursue. I think the driving force and the reason for taking that on initially grew out of the ideology of the 60s, out of a social justice ideology. This was, after all, a country where people were supposed to be able to make themselves better than they were born, and education was to be a key to that, and I think that's why we adopted this precarious ideology at the beginning of the college. A number of our colleagues in higher education more recently have come to a commitment to the same thing, not for reasons of ideology, but for reasons of economic and political necessity, because it has become clear ever since the 1970s that the gap between the top 20% of the population economically and everybody else is getting steadily wider. And there are a number of people who believe that that is both morally questionable and probably bad for the economy. And so a Stocktonian ethos has emerged to some degree in discussions of higher education. We welcome to the fray those belated converts to our point of view, albeit about 42 years late. But what we say to them when they come is that our experience indicates that if you want to do this kind of education, you're going to have to build some precarious and difficult educational structures to support that kind of an educational mission. I count 4 in particular, and they are outlined on your sheet, A through D. Let's take them one at a time. The first thing you're going to need is the general studies curriculum, or something like it. Because as students come to college and begin to consider what kind of courses they will take, and eventually what kind of majors they will take, what kind of career orientation they will choose, and what they want to do with their lives in general, they will need an essential piece of information that most of them do not have. And that is, they will need an overview understanding of what there is to choose from. And that is what the general studies curriculum was designed to give them. Now, other colleges make some efforts in this direction, But usually they take the easy way out, and their general education curriculum is composed of introductions to the various individual disciplines. The problem that those of us who put the college together had with that is that those courses are oriented upward toward the specialized major and don't have much lateral vision to help students see the relationships among those individual bodies of knowledge. Stockton took a very precarious and a very different and a very difficult alternative to that in constructing general studies. If you think about what Stockton does with general studies, we created an entirely separate discipline composed entirely of interdisciplinary courses. We required that students take anything from 1/4 to a full 1/2 of their total education in those kind of courses. We specified that all faculty members coming to the institution would be contractually obliged to teach those kind of courses, even though they were frequently not very well prepared to teach them by their graduate school experience. And we set up a separate division and a separate dean over there in the corner to look after this very precarious division. It was a massive commitment of resources and effort to this kind of general education so that students would have in their education a notion of what there was to choose from so that they could choose more wisely. Difficult way to do general education, resource heavy, labor intensive, but we thought if we could make it work, it would be a better form of general education. The second thing we decided folks would need in order to do well in this kind of a curriculum was rigorous training in the broadly applicable intellectual skills of reasoning and writing and basic mathematics. And we thought they would need that so that as they began to explore the full range of options opened up to them by those broad general studies courses, they would not have to post whole areas of the curriculum out of bounds because they were afraid of the reasoning or writing or mathematical requirements, so that they could explore those options without fear of failure. All right? Now again, other colleges do work in the area of general skills, but they work primarily in courses frequently taken and forgotten after the first years, and frequently taught by junior faculty members from the English department and the math department who figure that they didn't get their PhDs to do this kind of training, that this should be going on in the high schools, and so they hate the courses they have to teach, and they teach them badly as a result of that. Stockton, once again, did something much bigger, much more precarious, but we thought if we could make it work, we could do the students a lot more good. If you look at what we have now in terms of the robust skills instruction that goes on at this college, it began with the skills centers, and they are still here, where you can get tutoring in writing or in basic mathematics. When that didn't turn out to be enough, we then built a ladder of basic skills instruction that begins at the beginning of their college career and extends through to the end of it. For students who are poor enough to qualify, there is the EOF summer program designed to get them up to speed before they begin their college education. They move from that into the basic studies, now called the first program, where they get more intensive training in their first year at the college. And very Stocktonian and very unusual, after that there's a whole series of across the curriculum kinds of skills courses in critical thinking, in mathematics, and in writing, which extends the skills instruction all the way through their time at the college, and which involves in that instruction a very large number of faculty, a much larger number of faculty being involved in the enterprise in its overall reach than is characteristic of most other institutions. That was another difficult, precarious, labor-intensive, resource-intensive commitment that the college made because we believed it would produce a better product in the end. The third thing you're going to need is the preceptorial system or something like it. Because even if students now have some understanding of what there is to choose from, even if they have begun to develop the broad-based intellectual skills necessary to explore those options without fear and failure, They will need someone to sit with them and help them to glue those individual course decisions that they make together into a broader and more coherent overall approach to their education and to their career lives and to their lives in general. All right? And that is what the preceptorial system was designed to achieve. Now, other colleges do have mechanisms for imposing some sort of coherent structure on the individual course choices that students make. But in most of those other colleges, it is a series of courses required course by course by course by course. The problem with that from the point of view of those of us who were here in the early days of the college is that that struck us as being a one-size-fits-all approach to structuring student education. Those course requirements tended over time, we thought, to become static and out of date with changing times. They became, in many cases, a way of allocating student bodies into seats in courses that were low demand areas that the college wanted to pursue. We wanted structure, but we wanted something much more fragile and harder to achieve. We wanted the structure to be built as an individual structure, student by student by student. That's a utopian idea. It's very difficult to sustain. It's very difficult to maintain, okay? But the goal was to do that, and the way you do that is we didn't specify particular courses. We specified particular types of courses. Have to take 2 GNMs, 2 GSSs, 2 GAHs, but not the specific courses, all right? So when the students come in to talk to your preceptor, you sit them in the seat and you say to them, what do you want to do with your life? What do you think you're interested in? What do you think you might be good at? And you derive that information, and then you say, okay, let's take the areas that you seem to be interested in. I want you to take a course in that area, and a course in that area, and a course in that area. Then you go take the course, and you come back and talk to me again about what you learned. Did you find that you are good in that area, or that you are abysmal in that area? Did you discover that you are in fact fascinated by that area, or now that you understand it, you hate that area? There are a series of courses with elbow room to adapt where students find their way and they talk to their preceptor about that, and gradually you winnow down the areas of the curriculum that they are interested in and good at until at some point they make the terrifying decision to pursue a major in that area. But even after that decision is made and their choices are constrained at that level, even after that, Stockton maintains in its curriculum the full panoply of highly individualized modes of instruction that you would expect to find at exclusive private liberal arts colleges. There are opportunities for independent study, working one-on-one with a faculty member where you can generate a coherent written piece of research which you can append to your resume when you go into the job market. There are opportunities for internships where you can get an actual taste of working in a particular area of the economy, either locally or in the Washington, D.C. program, to which Stockton now sends at last count more students every year than any other college or university of any size anywhere in the country. There are opportunities for study abroad, so that when you emerge from college into an increasingly global economy and into an increasingly diverse American workforce, you too may have some understanding of cultures and languages other than your own. So the Stockton attempt was to do something harder, and that is to build structure in at the individual level rather than with a uniform set of requirements. The preceptorial process, those of you who have been through it, it's a messy process. But if you can get them to come to see you regularly, and that's not as hard as most people think because they don't know what the hell they're doing. I'm looking at my door and I don't have a slot left, okay? And I haven't since the beginning of advising, all right? And nobody makes them come. They come for the same reason I'd come, because they don't know what they're doing. And they need a little help, all right? So if you can make that work, you get structure, but you get structures built around individuals. Precarious, labor-intensive, but better if you can make it work. All right? Now, the last thing that you may now have divined from A through C is that this whole thing requires a mobilization of college-wide faculty and staff effort that is very unusual in American higher education, because Stockton does not, I repeat, does not farm out, as many colleges and universities do, a big chunk of the instructional content of what students get to graduate student teaching assistants and people from student services, all right? At Stockton, even in the early years, the students deal with full-time faculty members in terms of the general studies courses that they take, in terms of the skills courses that they take, in terms of the preceptorial advising that they get. The entire edifice floats precariously on top of an outpouring of faculty collective responsibility and faculty collective effort. I spent about a decade of my life, the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s, serving as a chairperson for 4 statewide task forces put together by the New Jersey Department of Higher Education to try to formulate statewide policy in higher education. And every one of those task forces was sector drawn. So we had people from the community colleges, we had people from the state colleges, we had people from Rutgers and Princeton. And when we talked about what we were doing at our various colleges, and I talked about the collective effort put out by Stockton faculty in A through C, nobody had anything like it. They would have liked to have had something like it, but they didn't have it, and I can tell you for certain that they're never going to get it, and we never would have gotten it had it not been for an accident of history that gave us the opportunity to build it with the reforming zeal of the 60s at our back and an absolutely blank slate onto which we could write. And therefore we managed to build it without encountering the stifling attempt to get anything through a college or a university which is radically decentralized and very good at resisting change. Okay. The question is, moving now to Roman numeral number 3. See how fast we're moving down the sheet? That may give you hope, okay? Can this critter, this complicated, labor-intensive, precarious critter that we built during that time in history, can it be maintained in different times and under different circumstances? And I think that, frankly, is a very open question. I think there are grounds for concern, Roman numeral number 3, are you following this? And grounds for hope. Let me give you the bad news first and the good news second. I think the 2 questions that Stockton has to answer is, can we continue to sell this kind of liberal arts education to an increasingly career-oriented group of students and parents in these precarious economic times? Can we bring students through the admission gate by telling them that this is what we do? And if we can, the second question is, if we can do that, can we continue to mobilize the level of collective faculty effort that is necessary for us to deliver on that promise? I think both are open questions. So let me talk to you about the reasons why I'm a little concerned under Roman numeral number 3. In terms of selling this kind of education to entering students, we are living in a period where there is a rapid decline in the appetite for liberal arts education because of the economic difficulties and because of the tendency of students, therefore, and their parents to lean toward career-oriented education. Because of declines in state funding, state colleges, like all colleges now, have to ask themselves how many people can they get through the gate to come in and fill the seats and pay the tuition. And if you're asking that question, you need to reckon with the fact that the sectors of American higher education that are growing the fastest are the ones that have decided to abandon the liberal arts goal of transforming students and to instead transform themselves in order to get the customers in the gate. All right? the for-profit folks, and the online folks, and the recently arrived MOOC folks are all of that variety, okay? So there's a real question as to whether or not Stockton can continue to generate this kind of education and bring in the clientele that it needs. I'll come to the good news on that in a little bit. The second question has to do with the ability to mobilize faculty to generate the effort that it takes to keep this whole operation afloat. When we started this college, we managed to do that because we were coming off of the idealistic 60s, and most of us had gone to graduate school when we were going to save the world and save higher education, and there was a great deal of enthusiasm based on that sort of thing. We also had the excitement of the act of creating a new college to keep us going. Now we live in a world where the 60s are further and further away from us with each entering class, where we take in a new class of faculty regularly, all of whom, like us, when we came in, are systematically mistrained by the graduate experience to do the kind of work that you're asked to do in a Stockton curriculum. And there's a very real, and the act of creation is no longer there to energize people. There's a very real question as to whether or not we can continue to excite the incoming faculty members to take the pledge to the one and only truth, the Stockton attitude toward education. And we can convince them that they will not be doing professional suicide by doing that. That's a very open question, okay? What's the good news? And I think there is some good news. I have grounds for hope in terms of selling this to Stockton students and in terms of mobilizing faculty support. We go now to Roman numeral number 4. That's the last one. You see that? You feel good about that? The last piece here. Okay, Stockton students. I don't pretend to know what Stockton students are going to look like in the future as we wage this struggle. But I know what they look like now from the classroom, just as most of the people in this room know what they look like now. This is Daly's characterization of them. They are hungry. Maybe not rabid intellectual curiosity, but they know it's tough out there, and they know a college degree advantages them out there. They have heard about the American dream, and they want a piece of it. They are hungry in that sense. I like them, secondly, because they're tougher than the prep school products that I dealt with in the last place I taught before I came here, whose success in college was assured at the admission gate, and whose success in life was largely assured by the wealth of their parents. These kids are not like that. Many of them work when they go to school. Many of them go to school full-time and work full-time. How they do that, I'm not quite sure, and that's probably why they tend to sleep in the middle of my lectures. They are tired, and they are, and I mean this in the best way because I was too, they are clueless. They haven't figured out what they want to do with their college education or with their lives yet. They just know that it's important to be in college, and they have parents whom I don't know at all, and therefore I am freed to soar, unencumbered by any facts here, to speculate what their parents are like because I was a parent myself some years back. The parents want what we all want. They want to know that the kids are going to be okay, that they're going to have a job, that they're going to be safe, that they're going to live happy lives. And college, they think, and that's why they come to see us, is a step in the right direction. Now, it seems to me if that's what the clientele is like, you might be able to make the case and get them in the gate with a truthful argument about Stockton and say, look, in an economy, the dominant brute fact of which is an accelerating rate of unpredictable change, where the United States Department of Education estimates that students coming to college in this era will probably, on the average, have to change their basic career lives no fewer than 3 times in their working lives just to stay up with changes in the economy. That just maybe the kind of liberal arts education that Stockton offers, that broad base along which they can move, is not a substitute for career education, but the best base for career education. We can say that, and we can say that honestly to them, it seems to me. And we can say, secondly, in your attempt to figure out what to do with your education and what to do with your career and what to do with your life, all right, we will sit by you as an individual and treat you as an individual and hold your hand to help you get through building an education that makes sense in terms of your own individual abilities and your own individual desires. I think you can probably sell that. Okay? I don't think that's an impossible task. Okay. What about selling faculty members on pledging themselves to the labor-intensive Stockton pursuit? I don't know about that. There are new faculty members in this room, so I guess my response is you tell me. And I'm almost done here. But I'll offer the argument that I always offer to people when we hire them in political science, and anybody else who's dumb enough to sit still long enough for me to say it. And that is, at this particular kind of college, we do traffic in the American dream. We do collectively hold our shoulder against the closing door that the gap between the rich and the poor threatens in this society to slam in their face long enough for them to slither through into the good life. That is something that it is worth using your life to do. And because we cater to students who very much need us at this college, we do the only thing that touches on immortality. We have an impact, a beneficial impact on our better days, on the only thing that ever lasts, which is the next generation. And those two things is not a bad way to spend a professional life, it seems to me. Not a bad thing to sign on to compared to what you can do elsewhere in American higher education. I've been here 42 years. I don't regret a damn day of it. Or, well, maybe a few. I got carried away there for a moment. Not many of them, anyhow. Not many of them. And for the new faculty members in the room, I hope that when you get to 40 years at this joint, you'll feel as good about your 40 years as I have felt about mine. I'm done and we can shut up. What I thought I might ask the people in the room, this is what I ask the students, and then they all face me down and say, don't talk to him, and only encourages him. And if you don't talk to him at all, maybe he'll let us out here a little early. I expect you to behave a little better than that. But in any case, this is my take. It is, of course, a utopian take, it seems to be. And the floor is open for people who think that somehow I am refusing to see reality and that the world has aged beyond me in the Stockton dream. What do you make of this place? And what do you make of our prospects? Honestly now, I think it's touch and go in that last category. I don't know whether we're going to make it or not. Yes?
I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. I would like to forge a connection between your Roman numeral 3b, institutional aging, and Roman numeral 4a, Stockton students. You said that the generation of the 60s spirit is out the way, going out of the door. I think we're on the verge of developing a new 60s generation here. We are graduating a small but very engaged and smart cohort of students regularly who are really sick of seeing the environment ruined. They're sick of corruption. They're sick of mindless consumerism. They're very engaged. And I think that Stockton has done something else that is very smart that other institutions of higher education don't do, and that is we hire our own graduates. And we should continue to do that and also seek out other individuals with similar visions to keep that kind of spirit of engagement going, because I agree with you, it is very labor intensive, especially in an increasing environment of pressure to publish more and more, to do more and more service, to teach long hours, have more students as preceptees. So it takes a certain kind of engaged person, but I think we have some of them here, and there's a growing number out there. I'm optimistic.
Do the rest of the people in the room have that sense that about the student body? I understand the argument that Marion makes based on where she wants it to go. What's your sense of the student body? Do we have a growing group of engaged students who are likely to find the Stockton philosophy, or are they all career-oriented and pretty much beyond reach? What's your sense? Oh, come on now.
I want to talk about something else, so I'm going to let people...
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Haran, he's a member of that student body. If you haven't been able to figure that out, he's not a young faculty member, he's a student. Yes, Mr. Haran.
I can definitely agree there is certainly a portion of the student body that is like that is kind of a new 60s, a new movement. But on the other hand, there are so many students who are just so oblivious to things that are going on in the world. And fortunately, we have groups like the Political Engagement Project that try to bolster involvement with these things. But it seems, I am hopeful too that this sort of a thing can continue. But it seems that at least for now, it's a minority of the students today, certainly, that are along those lines. And there is certainly a majority that have no interest or really have no knowledge, really, of what's going on.
Okay. Yes, Cindy.
Well, Bill always played Mary Sunshine, and I always played Doom is Coming. So here's my Doom is Coming. I think the truth probably lies someplace between this, because we have a great, in political science courses, in political theory courses, where I really get to know a lot about what students think. There are a great many people who are, I would say, engaged, but I would scarcely characterize that as 60s sort of engagement, right? I mean, these are people who, along with Paul Ryan, read Ayn Rand and fell in love. And those people show up every day here, which is fine. I mean, I think it's good that they're here, and as a friend of mine said, my hope is to see if I can't convert 18-year-old Republicans to 22-year-old Democrats. I haven't had a real good luck with that. But I think we have a wide range of students. I think there are a different range of students because I think the environment in which they're coming of age is different. I mean, I think it's a lot scarier out there than it was in the 60s. Our parents were scared in the 60s, but we weren't scared. And now they're scared, I think. But I think that's hopeful. I think it's always hopeful when anybody shows up at all to college. I think it's hopeful. And I just have to say, this is my 33rd year, and I have not begrudged a moment of it, although I didn't find it to be quite as much like California as Professor Taylor led me to believe it might be.
Almost identical, I think, Cindy. Just a quick comment, Dick, and then hang on to the microphone from the chair. I am not dispirited by the students I have now, because in many respects, they're no different than the majority of my students were, even when the faculty was buoyed by the 60s, and they're not different than I was. I didn't have any strong political views, conservative, liberal, or otherwise, but I was primarily concerned. I had no idea when I went to college what I wanted to do. What I knew is what I didn't want to do, which is work in a factory like my old man, okay? And so my attitude toward college was just set up the damn hurdles and I'll jump them. And I didn't really get interested in my education until I was a senior. When I started to be able to put the pieces of it together and say, boy, this is really interesting, and then they said, too late, time to graduate. So the entire 4 years was wasted. But my students, for almost the entirety of those 4 years, for me, I was very much like the students that I teach. So I am not depressed by the fact that they're like that. I can recognize myself. And there is a slow process by which you can see them change if you get them early and then get them late. So I'm a little more optimistic about the impact of education. I used to teach students when they came in the Basque program, and then I'd get them in senior seminar on their way out, and I'd look and see who was in my senior seminar and say, oh my God, he survived. He's still here. And then the kid would open his mouth and he was a transformed human being. It really led me to believe in the possibilities of education. I'm done, Dick. You're on.
Another way to answer that question about changes in the student body is to note that, and I hope other faculty, I'm curious to know if other faculty are seeing this, that even from the very beginning, and still today, the way you give out grades in a course results in a kind of bimodal distribution. Usually it's a Gaussian bell curve, but at Stockton it's always been two bell curves, one to the right and one to the left. And that was true in the very beginning, and it's still true today. And the one difference that I think I'm seeing is that that there are fewer people in the upper bell curve today and relatively more people in the lower bell curve. And that is, I think, a way in which we're not attracting some of the real oddballs that came here in their early years and that knew what they wanted and were appreciative of everything we had to offer them.
Interesting.
So I throw that back to the other faculty as to whether they're seeing that effect as well. But I wanted to address the main presentation you made from a different philosophy of history. You made it seem as if we all contributed to this original great idea. I don't think that's the way it happened. I think
I was afraid somebody was going to say that.
I think the original president's first hire, Wes Tilley, the vice president for academic affairs, who came from the University of Chicago under Robert Hutchins, under a very liberal period of general education there, he brought many of the ideas that we have adopted. And he hired deans that looked for faculty who were willing and interested in
That's true.
adopting that philosophy.
Okay.
And I think he did a better job with some of the original deans than other of the original deans. And at least in NAMS, where I come from, we always talked about the oddball quotient as being the essential factor for a new faculty member. And I think we have reproduced that in the subsequent hires that we've made. That is, the original faculty tried to find that in their replacements. So I see hope in the fact that at least part of the college still has the kind of faculty who are interested in some of these interesting ideas. And furthermore, on the philosophy of personalities being essential to history, I think it's made a big difference as to who the president has been, because that has defined what I think is expected of faculty. And the latest incarnation, I'm sorry to say, is the guy who wants to see a lot of research come out of this place. And you just can't do that intensively and still have time for all the other stuff. And I just see a quandary in that problem. I'm curious to know what other people think about it.
Other people have a point of view on that? Okay, that's all, that's all right. Yeah.
A little bit later, but we were the oddball.
Listen, I'll say that I agree with most of what you said historically. I think, as I said, many of the ideas I talked about today were in place by the time I got here. As a matter of fact, I read the advertisement in my office in Grinnell that said what kind of college they want to build. And much of what I said today was in the advertisement, as a matter of fact. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven because that's exactly what I wanted to do. So a lot of these ideas were there before we came. They got modified as time goes on, but they were there. I think the early deans did make a big difference in the character of the disciplines. That is to say, I think that NAMS was, I don't want to say the oddball faculty, but at least the faculty most committed to the description that I have laid out here today. Some of the rest of them were various places along the spectrum. My impression of the impact of college presidents, however, is a little different. I did not see Dick Bjork, the first one, as very heavily involved in controlling curriculum. Wes Tilley was, but he was not. I didn't see Peter Mitchell in that vein, and frankly, I have not, at least from my standpoint, seen very much of the current president messing around with curriculum. I think most of those judgments get made below the presidential level, and so the critical question is what's the faculty going to do? In this academic institution, we pretty much have been able to do what we want to do. If you got a large number of faculty that is enthusiastic about something, most administrators have the good sense to get the hell out of the way and let them do what they're, you know. Faculty members, I think, after ship's captains are the last true autocrats on earth. Nobody tells them what to do, and the organization lines that come down to faculty disappear. It's a separate medieval guild answerable to no one, I am delighted to say, and I think it's been that way at Stockton and continues to be that way, and I'm happy with it just that way.
One footnote, I talked to someone recently who had just graduated from Columbia University, and contemporary civilization is still going strong there.
Yes.
For 40 years.
Yes, I understand it's a marvelous course. And so I could probably find a justification for requiring that one, just as long as we don't require more than that. And leave us with enough flexibility.
I actually wanted to put a plug in as someone who came here new and from somewhere else. I'm on one of the academic planning groups about looking at Boyer's model of scholarship one of the reasons I wanted to be here, and one of the goals of that group is to see that it is extended, because scholarship, a lot of the things that you were talking about, new ways of teaching, new ways of engagement, are also, should be deemed as scholarship, not simply all the good stuff that one might do in a lab or with a computer program. And that's something that I know in a number of different things beyond and different from my role as the dean of, God forbid, professional business, is near and dear. And there is a committee on that because we want that definition. I mean, by definition, though, we should be, I'm going to sit here and say the things that you're talking about doing, we should be scholars, and we should be sure that our work is seen and shared beyond just us. We don't want everything that Bill Bailey has, all the wonderful things that he does to walk out with him. We want him to leave stuff behind that the rest of us can use, and the same for all of you. And so, to me, that's an important part of what Stockton is still trying to do, and there's groups of people trying to do it.
Other questions, other comments?
Just a question, Bill.
Hey, Ron.
In today's Argo, it laid out, it asked the question whether the college is coming to become a university or not. It laid out some of the pros and cons. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
I promised I wouldn't say that. No, I didn't. Oh my! I was going to stay out of trouble on this, but I guess I don't think it's a very good idea, and I'll tell you why. I think if you look at the way it grows directly out of what I was saying today, I think Stockton was designed initially to be a quality liberal arts college, okay? I think most of the basic structures at the college, including the ones that I spelled out on this sheet, were designed to serve that purpose. Third, I think there is national movement in the direction of saying that colleges in this country ought to now to be doing, given the split between the upper 20% and the bottom 80%, precisely the kind of central mission to help people move across that gap, at which Stockton already has expertise and already has the structures in place that most other colleges don't have. We could be an exemplar for the kind of education that was in vogue in the 60s and is now coming back into vogue for economic reasons. Therefore, I think that our comparative strength, the area that we can best distinguish ourselves in, is as a public college. I think you need to keep in mind that when you talk about becoming a university, and when my friend over here tallies up the statistics on people who think we ought to become a university, most of the people who are responding assume that in becoming a university we join Rutgers and Princeton. I think what they don't understand is that we join George and Court and Fairleigh Dickinson and all of the people who have called themselves universities but are not by the normal standard of real universities. So I think our comparative, we're at a time in place when what we are good at doing and are ready to do and love doing has come back into vogue. And I don't think we ought to walk away from that to become Monmouth University, for God's sakes. That's what I think. And I'm sorry, I just had to say it. Yes. No, that means... I knew I'd provoke her into a response. This was such a cheerful gathering before we got into this. Shame on you, Ron, for inciting to riot. Okay.
I'm not going to go there unless anyone wants me to go there. I think most of you have heard me talk about this issue more than you probably care to have heard me talk about this issue. And once more, for the Peanut Gallery, 90% of what I articulate is not a personally held belief. It is articulating on behalf of a group of people and a set of statistics that we've been gathering, but not one woman's opinion. What I did want to speak about was that article, because to some extent it helps to link together a couple of the earlier comments. The young woman who wrote that piece is a transfer student. This is her first year at Stockton. Indeed, this is her first semester here at Stockton. She heard about this issue when I spoke to a class on higher education that Tom Price is teaching. And she became interested in the issue and thought that she wanted to learn more about what the concerns were, the variety of concerns were, both for and against. So she approached the task force committee and asked if she could interview us to articulate what the first 5 reasons. It was supposed to be 2 students, I should say, who were working on the project. One was going to take the 5 reasons to support a transition, and the other one was going to take the top 5 reasons not to support such a transition. To the young woman's dismay, the person who was taking the con side, she felt had not been rigorous enough, primarily because that student had not spoken to anyone else besides that student. And so she asked to rewrite that section of the piece. And she wanted to speak to a number of task force members who held a number of opinions. The reason I'm laying this out is while that piece, I think, does address some of the nice ideas in the discussions that have been happening on campus, I think it's an excellent illustration of a student who is proactive in thinking about what kind of institution she is, who is proactive in thinking about what kind of institution she might be in, and is weighing the options available to her. And that in itself is eminently commendable.
Right.
Other comments? Yes, John.
Bill, mine's a question historical, because I know you've been doing this for a long time, but at the time that Stockton was created, up in North Jersey, so was Ramapo. And knowing that you were on that task force in the late 80s and early 90s,
Mhm.
did you see Ramapo taking the same direction that Stockton was doing, or was Stockton's direction academically unique to itself?
I thought it was significantly different. I don't recall in detail, but I never had the sense that Ramapo was, so, in that sense, other than the origin of the timing involved, was a sister institution. They did a number of things. I think they were more traditional than we were. I remember they went toward international studies for a while. A lot of their reactions were determined not by a coherent philosophy as nearly as I could make out, but by where they were. They were competing with schools in the New York area, city area, for example, and they ran into a lot of enrollment difficulties early on. And I think they were preoccupied more than we were with practical considerations of the region in which they were found. Other colleges that were trying to do the same kind of thing at the same time, Evergreen, for example, it seems to me was a sister institution that was trying to do the same kind of thing. They were more radical than we were, as a matter of fact. At Evergreen, they were about the business of literally reconstituting the curriculum every year. And all of the titles were different. They got in trouble with the legislature that happens to be in Olympia, where the school is, because nobody could figure out what in the world they were doing. There were some other colleges that were trying to do what we were doing in the sense of being quality liberal arts public institutions. Hampshire was like that. Evergreen was like that. Stockton, in some sense, and this is when I'm about to contradict myself, where a president did have an impact, was more conservative in that regard. If you talk to President Bjork about a liberal arts college, he would say, and selected professional programs. Every time you said liberal arts college, he'd say, and selected professional programs. He came to the conclusion that it had to be a mix. And I'll get reaching down from him into the structure where most of this innovation was taking place into general studies. Setting up general studies courses based on the divisions, the basic divisions of human knowledge, the arts and humanities, the natural sciences, and the social sciences, was, compared to the early freelance general studies, pretty conservative. And I had a hand in that, and it was done, number one, to give the general studies curriculum a constituency inside of each of the divisions that would save it from the predations of the people who wanted it done in from the early days of the college. And it was also to make a connection for career-oriented students. We're going to build a base along which you can move in pursuing a career at the next stage of your education, but the base is going to be reasonably close to the fundamental disciplines which the vocationally or career-oriented programs draw upon. So if the basic units are something as like the natural sciences, the social sciences, and the arts and humanities, the general education edifice is closer to the career-oriented stuff. is more tightly connected to it and therefore is more credible with the students than when we used to have general studies designations that were completely unrelated to anything the students had any knowledge of. So Stockton, in part because of the impact of the first president and because of changing the structure of general studies partway into the process, has been kind of a middle ground between the career-oriented stuff on the one hand and the non-career-oriented stuff on the other hand. And I think that compromise was a smart move. And I think it makes it possible for us to talk to career-oriented students about general education as being an essential base for their subsequent career development rather than something that is totally separate from it.
Another problem with Ramapo is that its faculty all came from New York City and retained their allegiance to New York City. So it was a commuter faculty, and they never generated a kind of internal coherence to the institution.
So when I talk about the uniqueness of Stockton, it is Stockton.
It is.
Many times on the road, I'll get the comparison between the two, because I think people on the outside feel there's an innate connection between the two because they were started the same time.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like they evolved in the same way whatsoever.
I don't think the connection's there.
Thank you.
Bill, if I could chime in myself for one sec. You used the term collective a couple of times, collective effort, collective vision
Right.
among the early faculty. And I wonder if sort of culturally, politically, socially, we've seen it all since the time that you were talking about of the founding, a move toward greater individualism among either faculty or students, and whether you've noticed this over time and whether it represents one of the threats that you talk about at all.
I think certainly in the early days the faculty was bound together to some degree by virtue of the fact that we were all involved in the grand new experiment. So there was a sense of collective responsibility because we were doing something hard and doing something new, and that was there. But even during that period of time, there were very sharp divisions. As Dick Colby pointed out, based on the characters of the divisions, shaped largely by the first dean in those divisions, those were there. You want to keep in mind also, as I mentioned early in the talk, there were a lot of people who came to Stockton in those days who in the end didn't fundamentally agree with the direction that the college has taken. People who were arguing, look, I could have a much better political science major and a much better literature major and a much better chemistry major if we could just wipe out these damn general studies courses and turn the resources. I was a dean for a little while as a defender of general studies, and I used to have to go in there with, armed to the teeth because they didn't want to cough up the courses. I can do a much better job in the natural sciences. I can do a much better job in the social sciences. They don't have to waste my goddamn faculty members on this kind of stuff. So the whole way through this, I want to say that the history of this college has not been peaceful. It has been exhilarating and fascinating and exhausting, but the struggle over this kind of definition has been going on since the beginning of the college. And to some degree, if you look at the structure, what is remarkable to me is that this survived. You look at other institutions, read the Harvard Red Book. Every 10 years they come out with one where they say, now we're really going to do a good job with undergraduate education. Okay, 10 years later they get another one, they've done nothing. And the reason they've done nothing is because the disciplines are too strong, and every time you try to divert any energy into something that isn't disciplinary education, they get chewed up and spit out by those. And that is what a lot of people said would happen to us. They said this is a flash in the pan. They said this is labor intensive. You will never be able to hold this together. It's a wonderful, a noble idea. You're doomed. That's what the guys said when they came in here 40 years ago to look at this place. And that is what has happened in a lot of institutions. We've had the fights, but for the most part, he says modestly, the good guys won.